They're not going to foul. The Heat will let it play out. It's over. At last, the long wait is over. After 47 years, the Denver Nuggets can finally call themselves NBA champions.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. I'm your host, as always, Tyler King, here to talk all things hoops in the Mountain Time Zone. This is episode 87, and we are back talking about the Denver Nuggets, as you can guess by the intro video again today. Last time we talked about the Nuggets was immediately after, well, a couple days after the end of the season, after losing to the Timberwolves in 6 games in the first round. The franchise is the first round exit with Nikola Jokic and both Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray healthy during this current era. And last week, about six days ago now that from that you're recording this, we got to hear from the Nuggets front office, Josh Kroenke, Ben Tenzer, John Wallace, as well as David Adelman, and kind of the season-ending press conference. And it's going to be a very interesting summer for the Nuggets. I talked about this last time we were talking about the Nuggets, and I'm more convinced that there's a couple different paths that they can go on the summer, and some are pretty crazy, some are less crazy, but it's going to be pretty interesting. They've obviously got their own first-round draft pick this year, number 26 overall, so that's going to be something to monitor, but a lot of moves to be made, or lack of moves to be made. We'll see exactly kind of what happens. But to help me break that down, the offseason as a whole, then kind of the season-ending press conference with Josh Kroenke and the rest of the front office is my colleague, Vinny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette. Vinny, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Enjoying this little break before, just watching basketball recreationally before things can really get popping again.
Yeah, I said this on a show earlier this month, but it's like the least busy I've been in May in like a long time. Like usually you and I are both, you're usually busier than I am with traveling, but covering the Nuggets playoff runs these last couple of years, especially since the title run, which was really just kind of grueling with how long that one went, even though, we had a decent break in between the West Finals and the NBA Finals, and the Finals is over in 5 games. Just going deep into June like that, it just feels like a lot of a grind. And now it's like, well, we're used to at least getting to the second round, or covering the second round series. Now kind of watching that from afar has been interesting. Anything kind of jumping out to you just quickly about what the West playoffs look like? Is it just that, OKC and San Antonio are going to be running this conference for quite a while, it seems like?
Yeah, and just like the playoffs as a whole feels like it's just kind of like put a nail in the coffin of like the 3-point era, or like the maximum attempts kind of being the focus for offenses. And it's just like, it feels, it's defense and athleticism that are kind of, at least in the playoffs, kind of running things now, which probably not great news if you're a Nuggets fan.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's something the Nuggets are kind of lacking right now. I said a couple weeks ago after the end of the season, like, the Nuggets probably just have to try to get younger and more athletic across the roster, because that is where the league is trending. And there's only a couple of ways you can really do that if you're the Nuggets. Like, obviously, hitting on this first round draft pick, which we can talk early guys to watch out for. Like, I've done an initial big board so far that'll probably change a little bit over the next month or so. But just for you, like, how did you kind of process the end of the Nuggets season and kind of where this team is at? We'll get into kind of how the team feels about where they are at. But for you personally, like, what was your take on just the Nuggets season ending in the first round overall, and kind of where they need to go next to get back to being? Because I think, throughout much of the regular season, even when they weren't fully healthy, you saw the flashes of like, okay, when these guys get back together, they're still a championship contender. But that feels like that conversation has changed a little bit since how the postseason ended.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised just by like the way the front office presented itself. And by front office, I mean, I really just mean Josh Kroenke. He did a lot of the talking at the press conference. We don't hear from him very often, so it makes sense that he was kind of the one that a lot of the questions were directed toward. But it was just kind of like they presented this front of like, we're all right, like everything's okay, trust us, like we'll figure out the best path forward. Where you take a scroll through my mentions the last couple of weeks, like the fan base is on the way opposite side of the spectrum and is like freaking out, and I think justifiably so. And so they're all too smart to come in here and be like, we have to trade these guys, or we're definitely going to trade Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon, because then you're just giving away leverage for no reason. So there was a lot of, oh, we could run it back. We will explore other ways to get better. We could do this. We could do that, which, is, I think, pretty typical for a lot of these press conferences. But I think just the overarching theme for me is just like, hey, guys, calm down. We've got this. We've built a championship roster before. We can do it again. I think one thing Josh said that stuck out to me is it was, about salary cap or the apron talks, where it's just like smart teams can find a way to shed salary and get better. So he, especially when it comes to basketball, I think he likes to think that he kind of, is more qualified to help the, Ben Tenzer and John Wallace's than he would be with, some of the other teams the family owns.
Yeah, that kind of stuck out to me too, because our colleague Mark Kisla basically asked Josh Kroenke straight up, "Are you the de facto GM?" Basically, because obviously he gets the nomination for Executive of the Year. He said he's the one vote he got. I think he chalked it up to an inside joke between him and somebody in the industry. So and obviously you can only put one name down, just so they can't really put Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, who probably, if you could put multiple names down, that's probably what it would be. And like you said, Josh is kind of overseeing things, maybe more than he would with like the Avs or with Rapids or even like the Rams, or Arsenal. The variety of sport, the various sports teams that KSC runs. Just and like you said, the comments from Kroenke and the front office were very much like, we're keeping our options open, but we have to. Everything is on the table except trading Nikola Jokic, basically, which is kind of how basically every offseason should have been the plan for the last couple of years. Because even when they're playing well and winning championships, like if someone blows you away with an offer for a player on your roster that's not Nikola Jokic, you probably at least have to talk about it and consider it. Not that really even happened, but so it's going to be interesting. I guess we can kind of get into the potential paths here. Like, running it back fully would be incredibly expensive. And I know Benedetto from the Denver Post was kind of pressing Josh on this a little bit. Like, if you fully run it back, and obviously that would include bringing back Peyton Watson at whatever his number is going to be at. Like, they're already a first apron team. They would be well into the second apron. And that's just, it doesn't seem like anything the Kroenke family is interested in doing, especially given the fact that the Nuggets, not that they've been on a downward trend as a franchise, like they won, I think it was the second most games tied for the second most games in the regular season in the Jokic era this past season with 54. But, since the title, it's been back-to-back second round exits against teams that were just younger and more athletic. And then this year, another loss against Timberwolves in the first round. So you kind of see a little bit of the downward trend, and it's hard to maybe justify spending way into the second apron just to kind of keep this roster together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think we have to spend much time on this option. Josh did a pretty good job of ducking a lot of pretty direct questions or circling around. But everything about the way this team has been run for the 5 or so years I've been covering it, I do not see them going into the second apron to run it back with a team that came up short in the second round. This team could have gone to the NBA Finals and won the finals, and I'm still not sure they would live in the second apron for the opportunity to run it back. And, I think there is some, I don't know if this team should operate in the second apron just because, it's not like, the repeater tax is just money out of the Kroenke's pockets, and there's no hindrance to what the front office can do. Second apron obviously gets into, makes trades much more harder. You get in a position where you could be forfeiting draft picks or have the draft picks move back. And it's just with the way the salaries look, I just don't think I'm almost certain they're not going to be a second apron team starting next season.
I would be stunned at that as well. So the version of running it back that I think they're talking about is like, okay, that means Nikola, Jamal, and Aaron Gordon are back. And then probably two out of three of Cam Johnson, Christian Brown, and Peyton Watson are back. And then maybe you bring back some key bench guys. The Bruce Brown conversation is interesting. Tim Hardaway Jr. We'll see if he's a minimum guy again after having a pretty solid season where he's a finalist for Sixth Man of the Year. I wouldn't expect Jonas Valanciunas back. There's some young guys, obviously, as well at the end of the bench. So for you, like, when he talks about running it back, is that mostly what you're thinking of? Like, okay, we're not breaking up the core three guys, the highest paid guys, Joker, Jamal, and AG, and then you're just kind of choosing 2 out of 3 between Cam, Christian, Peyton, mostly depending on what Peyton's kind of free agency looks like, I think.
Yeah, I think it largely comes down to where Peyton's number ends up, because but it's just, I keep thinking myself in circles about this stuff, because it's like I'm almost throwing Christian Brown in the like top 4, not in terms of production, but in terms of if he comes back healthy next year and he looks like his old self again, moving off of him this summer would be moving off of him at his like basement level value. Like
especially considering the contract is kicking in next year and he's coming off the worst season, one of the worst seasons of his career so far, mostly due to injuries. But yeah, I agree with you. You're not getting positive value for him. Yeah.
So that to me is a panic move. And I mean, I feel bad for Cam Johnson, because like it was a tough year for him in terms of like started slow with the shot, had the injury. Every time there was felt like a time in like March where he was like figuring out a rhythm, and then he had like some ankle thing pop up. But then in the playoffs, the last few games of that series against Minnesota, you could claim he was probably second most impactful player out there.
He definitely wasn't in Game 6 when they got eliminated. He was the second best guy on the Nuggets in that game for sure.
So it's just like, hey, thanks for your service, Cam. We gotta send you somewhere else so we can keep Peyton. And I mean, if it comes down to youth and athleticism and defensive ability, Peyton certainly has the upside over Cam there. Cam is the sturdier option. Cam's jump shot is more established as being a real thing. I think he had a career year percentage wise. But I feel like this has kind of been the case since the middle of the season, where it's just like, for me, it comes down to like, to keep Peyton, Cam got to go. And the stomach for, matching whatever offer Peyton receives, I think kind of dictates, where the other offers for Peyton come in are probably going to dictate who stays and who goes.
Let's talk about Peyton quick, just because I didn't really talk about him. We didn't really talk about him a ton during the playoffs. I didn't really mention him, a lot after in the immediate aftermath, just because he was not a factor. He didn't play at all in the postseason, and was just kind of dealing with injuries at the end of the season with the hamstring stuff, despite having the career year he did. What do you make of what his market is going to be this summer, and how? I mean, there's not going to be that many cap space teams across the league. So that kind of limits things, especially when you're talking about when you get above $15 million a year for a player. Like you have to really have cap space to sign that kind of guy, because I think that even the non-taxpayer mid-level next year is going to be right around 15 million. So, it's what do you make of Peyton's season overall, how sustainable it is? And obviously the best part of it came when everybody else was hurt, basically. Obviously Jamal was out there for most of it, but it was really Jamal and Peyton running the show in that January, early February, or I guess just mostly January, because that's when Joker was out. But just what did you make of his season overall, and what his market could be this summer after an interesting season, despite it being objectively a career year numbers wise?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it probably starts with a similar deal to what Christian signed last year, which was 5 for $125. Peyton's younger, and I think he's got more two-way upside. So I think he'd be pretty well justified saying, I have demonstrated an ability to scale my game up and down. When the team is healthy, I have a defined role where I am a versatile defender who's getting out in transition, knocking down uncontested corner threes, and then there are opportunities where that stretch of Joker's not on the court. You got to see his on ball kind of creation, getting to different spots and scoring, which is just oh, okay, is he a $30 million a year guy?
Yeah.
Somebody could think that, it was
absolutely. Yeah.
And, I think if you're the Nuggets front office, you don't love that two of the teams with cap space are the Lakers and the Nets. You know, I saw Michael Porter Jr.'s already been in the Instagram comments. Like, I don't know if that's called tampering or recruiting. But, you know, Peyton's a big personality. You know, I think he'd thrive in one of those larger markets with, you know, not just the basketball opportunities, but just like he's an LA native. You know, he did the commercial with Yoke a couple of years ago. I can't remember what travel company it was, but like it
was like hotels.com or something like that, or Expedia or something like that. I think it was. Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, some of the opportunities that exist in LA or Brooklyn that don't necessarily exist in Denver would be appealing to Peyton. And I'm not saying that as a knock. I just think that's part of his personality and, you know, who he is. So, but yeah, I think the number's probably going to come in somewhere between $25 and $30 million a year. And, you know, you can get off Cam's contract for 23 and waive Jonas. And, you know,
that saves you $8 million. Yeah. So you're right, looking right at $31 million in savings, assuming you trade Cam just into, like, maybe he goes right back to Brooklyn into this cap space or something like that. Or maybe he goes to the Lakers or something like that. Yeah. So you're about 30 million in savings just for Peyton then.
But then you've still got to fill out the rest of the roster. You still need a backup center. You know, there's still other holes to fill. But I feel like that's kind of the only real outcome here is that Peyton fetches a pretty handsome offer from one of the cap space teams.
Just like in your mind, would you prioritize Peyton, or would you have a number and be like, okay, Peyton, this is kind of our number and we'll make things work if you want to come back at this. But if you're looking for a certain deal, or if you just are looking to be back home in LA, or you're looking for a bigger opportunity in Brooklyn, like, sayonara, a bit, like, you know, thanks for what you did for the last couple of years, but we have to move on. What would your objective be with Peyton, attacking Peyton's free agency?
Yeah, I think you just got to have a really honest conversation with Peyton and encourage him to be honest. Like, if he wants to be in LA, you know, I think there's a world where it makes sense where you try to work out a sign and trade with the Lakers, try and get something back. But, you know, for me personally, like, it'd be tough for me to get to the $30 million number, just because, like, that'd be putting a whole lot of faith in a pretty small sample size. Like, what if the nearly 50% shooting from the corner isn't real? You know, what if he's a 40% guy from the corner and like a 35% guy above the break? You know, how does that change? You know, I think that brings his ceiling down pretty significantly. But, you know, for a team that, like, athleticism and defense was kind of the glaring issue in the playoffs, like, just letting a guy young with that much upside walk for nothing, I think would be pretty close to a disaster.
Yeah, especially a homegrown guy that they traded future draft capital away to get. I think that was the 27 first that they traded to OKC to acquire Peyton's draft rights. He was obviously a late first round pick in 2022. So, you know, there's that as well, which obviously that bill is going to come due next year with the top 5 protected pick going to OKC. Same thing in 2029, which was the Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson package of picks that they got for that one, also from OKC. So we haven't really talked about the big kind of blow it up-ish option, but how realistic do you think it is that they move on from one of Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon? And who is more likely if they decide that, look, we're going to break up these 3 guys and just try to get more flexibility financially and try to spread that money around? Because obviously Jamal's at 50.1 next year. AG's right under 32 million with his extension beginning next year. So, you know, you could spread that money around if you trade one of those guys and maybe break that into 2 or 3 rotation players. Like, how would you view Jamal Murray coming off a career year in the regular season and Aaron Gordon coming off, you know, maybe the most injury riddled last couple months of his career, or at least maybe 12-ish months, I guess I should say.
Yeah, that's a really tough one because it's like Jamal is, to your point, Jamal's going to be an all-NBA guy. It comes down to whether he's going to be a second or third team guy. You know, even if the 65 game rule didn't exist, I think he'd probably safely be a third team guy this season. Coming off his best regular season and probably his worst postseason, albeit, you know, small sample size. Aaron just like a beloved guy around the organization, around the entire city. Like, he's poured into the city and the franchise, and it's still crazy to me, like the pop he gets when he's introduced before a playoff game. Like, it's louder than Jamal, it's louder than Joker. It's just like he's their dude. And I'm kind of the opinion you either bring them both back or you just get wacky and say, we're trading both of them and we're just desperately trying to get younger and changing the profile of the team. But if I had to pick one, I'm torn. I'd probably say Aaron's injury concerns for me are more severe than Jamal's playoff struggles. I think Jamal, part of it, like, sure, he needs a little bit more help getting separation if teams are going to put a Jaden McDaniels or a Lou Dort on him the length of the court. Sure, he can do a better job of hitting shots. I just think the sample size, the number of games he played, and like the level he played at over the course of the regular season, I think is just easier to rely on. But then you get back in this pickle of, I said this to Matt Moore at the end of season press conference. It was just like, as great as the two-man game, like the two-man game looked incredible for like early part of the regular season before the injuries hit, went away in the playoffs. But one thing we've seen in the playoffs the last few years is there's a two-man game defensively, and it's get Jamal on who you want and have Jokic's man set a screen for whoever Jamal is on. And it's just like, how do you combat that if you're still if those are still your two guys, like that just feels like, I feel like both keeping one of Jamal or Aaron has like, okay, you trade Jamal, you still need to find a starting point guard somewhere. You trade Aaron, then do you go small around Yoke and like Cam at the 4? Maybe that allows you to keep Cam and Peyton, and you go, I still feel like there's a hole to be filled either way. Maybe you get Jamal for a lesser point guard and, a young reserve defensive minded kind of guy. But I don't know if either of those guys have like great value. So I think I'd kind of be tempted to keep them both or send them both out and just significantly restructure the entire thing.
Yeah, I really hadn't thought about the trading them both angle, but that is kind of interesting to me because like they both have 3 years left on their deals. Like obviously AG's technically got 2, but he's got like a $37 million player option in a couple of summers, which I'm pretty sure he's going to pick that one up. And Jamal's obviously starting at 50.1 next year. Then he's at nearly 54 and then 57.5 in 2 years in 28-29. So both those guys are on pretty big contracts for varying reasons. Like Jamal, it's just a big number in general for a point guard who's entering his 30s in a year. And Aaron Gordon, that's paying above $30 million annually for a guy whose body seems to be breaking down a little bit at this point of his career at 31 years old. So, I mean, I'm sure you will get interested teams in both of these guys. And I'm interested to see like who you think like would be best fits for Jamal, best fits for AG. I know like the Phoenix thing had come up for Aaron Gordon, but that just does not really seem like there's any kind of match there with what Phoenix has in kind of what they have to offer in terms of picks and then even players in that regard and who they'd even be willing to give up. Jamal, I know like Portland has come up as a team that maybe needs a point guard. Obviously, maybe going back home to Toronto could be interesting if they're looking to upgrade after, being pretty close to beating Cleveland in the playoffs this year. So just kind of early, like, what are your early thoughts on each of those guys' trade markets and who would even be like, what teams would be potentially interested in them?
Yeah. I mean, Jamal, like, I think Toronto's a good shout because they've got some young guys, defensive minded, get him back home. And it's also just so weird to me, like, potentially trading these guys to another Western Conference opponent, it would just like, I don't know, feel iffy. And like, Aaron Gordon could make sense for like Golden State. That's, the closest team to his hometown, but it's just like, you really want Aaron Gordon coming back here as a Warrior or as a Sun or, Detroit's a team I think could be interesting for probably more so Aaron than Jamal,
Yeah.
just because I don't know how Jamal Cade would work. But
Cade's got good size, but that's kind of interesting from like, I mean, Cade could use somebody to help take some of the pressure off of him, but that seems like a little bit not enough ball to go around for both those two guys.
Right. And, I mean, Detroit could be in an interesting spot if they fail to reach the conference finals, just in terms of willingness to break it up. Orlando could be another team for Jamal in terms of, they could use the offense and they, feels like they have a few redundant pieces on the wings. I think Jalen Suggs is a name that's come up, but then it's just like, what are you going to do you're going to have Jalen Suggs and Christian Brown on the same team, and pay them both $25 million a year.
I was saying Jalen Suggs is at a pretty expensive contract. I think he's around $30 million a year at this point. Yeah.
I mean, I think, his contract was kind of the template for what Christian got, but he just might be a year or two ahead in the, probably slightly larger in a year or two ahead in terms of like his extension hit last year. Christian's goes into effect this year. Houston would be one maybe for Jamal, but they've got Van Vliet coming back. So I don't know if that one makes as much sense, but I think, when it just comes down to Jamal, you're just looking for teams that need, that scoring pop, a little more offensive spacing. And then Aaron, I think would be obviously more of a win now on a more maybe established roster is probably the only thing that makes real sense for him at this juncture.
Yeah, as those conversations potentially get more real, we can talk more about that, as the summer goes along. But yeah, I just think it's interesting for now to, because I hadn't really thought about kind of trading both of them. Like I thought it was like, okay, maybe you're trading one of them and you're getting two $25 million players for Jamal and Aaron Gordon. You're getting like a $20 million player and like a $12 million player, like that kind of thing, trying to breaking one of those guys up into two rotation players, but trading both of them would really maybe allow you to bring back Peyton and then keep Cam and all that kind of stuff. And then you're kind of looking to fill out your point guard spot and then rest of the rotation. But speaking of the rest of the rotation, before we get out of here, Ted, I do want to get your take on just kind of the bench situation kind of going forward and what that could look like. I mentioned earlier that I don't expect Jonas Valanciunas to be back. Just kind of that was the vibe. He's got $10 million non-guaranteed this year. I think $2 million is guaranteed. Then you've got Zeke Naji at nearly $7.5 million. Julian Strawther, last year of his deal, he's just under $5 million. Deron Holmes, a little over $3 million, and then Jalen Pickett. I think that's a team option for 2.4 this year. So not a lot of bench spots filled out. Like I think there's some guys they had this year that they would love to bring back, whether they were two-way guys. Obviously, Spencer Jones is going to be an interesting guy to watch as well. He's a restricted free agent. So just kind of what do you make of early what they could do at the bench? Like I'm sure maybe if they could get Tyus Jones back on a minimum again, maybe they would do that. Tim, I think if he is a minimum guy again, like I said earlier, like I think they'd love to have him back. Just kind of how would you go about trying to fill out this bench once you kind of know what the starting five or basically what the starting five is going to look like for next year?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's going to make a lot more sense once we get a better feel for what Jamal or Aaron, what their futures look like in Denver. But I think for the most part, it's going to have to be cheap guys. Like, I think the Jalen Pickett team option gets picked up just because he probably won't be a playoff guy next year, but you need guys.
He might never be, but he was a guy that ate innings a lot this year. Like he started a decent amount of games. How many games did he end up starting? 18 games this year. Played only in 50 because he was dealing with some injury stuff too. But he was an innings eater, like you said, for a good chunk of when a lot of guys were out.
David Edelman really liked Tyus Jones, obviously, despite him being a guy that was brought in on the buyout market and. Maybe that was just a factor of how desperately the team needed ball handling, and DA just trusted the vet who's played in more playoff games than he did a guy like Jalen. I still think Zeke's contract is going to be hard to move off. It's player option for the next year, even though it's a descending contract. But yes, I think, looking at it now, backup center, once again, is going to be the big question mark for this bench because don't see
the Deron Holmes experiment really hasn't gone that well in terms of, obviously he was hurt to begin his career, but then it's really, even this past year when he was with the team and not, down the G League, it still kind of felt like he was in between a 4 and a 5.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think you can go into next season banking on the Deron Holmes leap as a backup center. Maybe he jumps Zeke Naji in the rotation. But, that just feels like, Zeke has given him serviceable minutes at times on the defensive end. And, I don't know if we've seen that from Deron in meaningful games yet. Deron has been great in like the garbage time in terms of like hitting shots and, producing a bit. But it feels like he's still a ways away from being in the circle of trust. Like Julian Strawther, the guys I'm kind of circling as a leap candidate, just because, I think it was probably great for him to have Tim Hardaway Jr. around this year and just like see what it's like to be like that level of shooter where it's just like, I'm coming off a screen, I'm catching the ball and it's going up. There's no like scanning the court. Like if you believe in yourself and you've become that kind of shooter, you have that kind of green light. Julian obviously has some room to grow on the defensive end, and that'll probably come down to a lot of it. I did see Tim Hardaway Sr. mention that he thinks the Nuggets need to bring back Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't know if he was trying to angle for his son to get a pretty significant raise, because I think the market is probably, he's gonna have to, if he wants to be a Nugget, he's gonna have to turn down more money from somewhere else to stick around here, because I just don't know. I don't see a way the Nuggets address their issues and have room to give him what he's looking for. And there might also, I need to look at this. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, they might be in a similar situation to what they were with Bruce Brown in the championship run, where because they signed him as a free agent and they only pay him like 105% of his previous salary. Like, you remember, like they could pay Bruce Brown like a maximum of $6 million after the championship. But like the Nuggets legally could not match the offer Bruce got from Indiana.
I'm not sure if Tim's any different because he was a minimum guy this year. And he's he was an unrestricted free agent. So I don't know like how that works or like what they can offer him, if it's just the minimum or like if that like it's like above the minimum. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't know exactly the machinations on that, but it would. I imagine if Tim comes back, it's going to be a similar amount of money that he was this past year, which was like 3.5 or something like that. Julian Strawther is the interesting guy because he's the guy that we've all kind of expected to eventually be like a consistent rotation piece, and they just never got there. And this upcoming season is probably like now or never for Julian, because he's going to be a restricted free agent next summer. And I don't know what his place in the league is if he has another year like this past year where he's in and out of the rotation. Is a pretty useful shooter and offensive player, but just a kind of a liability defensively. Zeke maybe is a little bit more tradable this year, like you mentioned. It's not going to be the easiest thing, but he's only got $15 million left for these 2 years, and including the player option, which he's almost certainly going to pick up next summer. And like you said, maybe he's shown enough that he could be an innings eater for a team that is willing to just take his contract and not like get like you don't have to attach anything, but you're also not getting anything back for it. So maybe there's that angle. But just quickly before we get out of here, like I mentioned earlier, Nuggets do have the 26th pick in the draft. It's probably I'm sure you're probably going to say it's pretty similar to the bench, where it's like it kind of depends on what I mean. This is draft is before free agency begins, but Nuggets should have an idea by then of kind of what maybe the trade market looks like, or what Peyton's free agency is going to look like. But kind of what are your early thoughts on like what the Nuggets or who the Nuggets should be targeting at the end of the first round as they try to hit on this pick, like they have been hit or miss with some of their picks in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, it's gonna like. I don't think this is a team where you can go in with like the best player available mindset. Like it's got to be, best fit or best answer to a need, whatever that is. Like you're not like. So for me, it's the needs are defense, athleticism, ball handling. And at 26, I don't think you're getting a guy who checks multiple boxes there.
Probably not.
Or you can throw it back up big. If Jonas is gone and they're like, oh, we'll take whatever. There's the kid out of
Henry
Kentucky.
Vasar from North Carolina. Henry Vasar from North Carolina would be interesting.
Right. Yeah. And just say, hey, we like this guy. We think he's good enough. If it's ball handling, I don't know if Ben Surt's kid is going to drop, but I don't think that does much.
I have him at 16 on my early big board. I doubt he's going to fall, but I know he's been a guy that's mocked a little bit. Cameron Carr is a guy who's an athletic wing from Baylor who seems to be rising this week at the combine. So maybe he's not even available. Like maybe you're looking at like a Joshua Jefferson, who's like a 6'9" kind of point forward 4. He's probably going to be like a 4 that can be like a baby yoke off the bench kind of thing. So these are just kind of the guys that I'm looking at in this range. Like if you want to add like a wing shooter, if you end up trading Cam Johnson, like Milan Momcilovic from Iowa State would be an interesting option. Like there's a bunch of guys. And like you said, I think it's all just about like what kind of profile you think best fits what this roster is going to need going into next season, because a lot of these guys are going to be in the same tier. Like there's not like best player available doesn't really exist at the end of the first round, mostly given because of like the structure of the team, but also because it's basically the same tier of guy at this point of the draft.
And I think it's also worth noting the Nuggets can trade this pick, but I just really don't think they can trade it on draft night.
Yes,
but I'm not sure there's a world where that makes the most sense. Like this just feels to me like an opportunity to get a young guy. There will be good players there. It's just a matter of finding good might be too strong. There are going to be serviceable rotation players available at 26 that address one of the needs. So I just don't know if there's a world where what you get at 26 is more valuable than the opportunity to take somebody on a cheap contract that you're going to have, team control over for a handful of years. And, different scouting departments than previous ones, but, the Nuggets have had, some success in this late first round when it comes to, you look at Christian Brown, like even after last year, Peyton Watson, both those guys are moved up significantly in a redraft. I don't know, where Julian Strother would end up in his class, but there are certain guys that get drafted in this spot that also like flame out early and are just not NBA players. But I just think the opportunity to address a need and lock in a cheap contract on a young player is probably going to be too valuable for the Nuggets to pass up.
All right, man. That's all I got for you today. Appreciate you taking time to hop on here and talk about the Nuggets offseason. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting one for you as you're monitoring this and covering this throughout the summer over at denvergazette.com. So thanks again for taking time and joining us as always.
Absolutely.
All right, that'll do it for today's episode of Basketball in the Mountains. Thanks again to my colleague, Vinny Benedetto from the Denver Gazette, for joining us today to talk all things Nuggets heading into an interesting summer here in the Mile High City. And thanks again to all of you for listening to today's episode. Make sure you're subscribing wherever you do so, whether it's on Apple or Spotify. Leave those 5-star ratings over on those platforms as well. Or if you're watching on YouTube, which I know a lot of people prefer to do, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Make sure you're leaving likes on all these videos, leaving comments, all that stuff helps me grow the show and get it out there to more people, which is the goal here as we head into our second full off season, at least in terms of the NBA. We'll be talking more college stuff on the show coming up here later in the month of May and then early in June as well. While diving into the NBA draft perspective for both the Jazz and the Nuggets and a little bit of Suns as well. So thanks again to all of you for listening. Thanks again to Vinny Benedetto for joining us today, and enjoy the week of basketball.